Your spiritual battles have suddenly become incredibly sophisticated and overwhelming. If you try to fight them using last year's strategies, you will be entirely crushed. I will show you how to command your newly upgraded angelic security team so you can dominate this advanced level of warfare. What you are dealing with right now is not random pressure. It is not ordinary resistance. And it is not proof that something has gone wrong in your life. The attacks feel sharper now, more personnel, more timed, more intelligent. It is like the very thing pushing against you knows where you are tired, knows where you are vulnerable, knows exactly when to hit your mind, your peace, your confidence, and your calling. Have you noticed that lately? The pressure does not just feel heavier. It feels studied. That is what confuses so many people in this season. They assume the increase in warfare means they are losing ground. But sometimes the exact opposite is true. Sometimes the battle intensifies because your position changed before your emotions caught up to it. You are not imagining the shift. The game just got harder, and when the game gets harder, it is usually because your assignment got bigger. That means this is not the moment to panic. This is the moment to recognize what season you are actually in. Because once you understand why the resistance changed, you stop interpreting every attack as failure. You start seeing it as evidence that something around your life has already been upgraded. And that is where we need to begin with the changing of the guard. There is a reason the pressure changed. A lot of people think spiritual warfare is supposed to look the same at every stage of life. They expect the same temptations, the same discouragements, the same kinds of delay, the same patterns of resistance. But that is not how real warfare works. Battles evolve when position evolves. And one of the clearest signs that something has shifted in your life is that the old level of opposition no longer fits what you are carrying now. What you are facing may feel alarming, but it may actually be announcing something bigger than you realize. There was a changing of the guard. Something about your life, your calling, your maturity, your spiritual weight, or your proximity to purpose has triggered a reaction in the unseen realm. The enemy does not panic over people who are merely busy. He panics over people who are becoming dangerous to the systems he relied on. He reacts when someone starts walking with greater clarity. He reacts when compromise stops working. He reacts when confusion no longer keeps you trapped for as long as it used to. And he reacts when your next step threatens to produce consequences beyond just your own life. That is why the battle can suddenly feel strangely specific, not just general discouragement, but targeted discouragement. Not just random distraction, but perfectly timed distraction. Not just ordinary fatigue, but fatigue that seems to arrive right when obedience matters most. That is not an accident. The resistance became more intentional because your movement became more consequential. And this is the point where many people misread their season. They think, why is this happening now? Why do I feel more opposed when I am praying more, growing more, trying harder, and finally getting serious? Shouldn't things feel lighter? Shouldn't I feel stronger? Shouldn't the path be cleaner if I am actually moving in the right direction? Not necessarily. Sometimes progress does not first announce itself with peace. Sometimes it announces itself with resistance. Sometimes the evidence that you are moving closer to what matters is not that the pressure disappeared, but that the pressure reorganized itself around stopping you. That does not mean every inconvenience is spiritual. It does not mean every hard day is an attack. But when the warfare becomes deeply personal, unusually coordinated, and repeatedly aimed at the very place where your future is trying to break through, you should stop only asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, What changed about me that made this level of resistance necessary? That question can shift everything. Because once you ask it, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of chaos and start recognizing that your current struggle may be a reaction to promotion. And promotion often feels uncomfortable before it feels powerful. Think about it in ordinary life. When responsibility increases, scrutiny increases. When influence increases, resistance increases. When your decisions begin to affect more than just you, the margin for distraction gets smaller and the pressure to misstep becomes greater. That pattern exists naturally. And it exists spiritually too. Entry-level demons do not attack executive-level destinies. That is the quick recap some people need to hear twice. Entry-level demons do not attack executive-level destinies. The reason the battle changed is because the stakes changed. The enemy is not creative in the way people imagine. He is observant. He studies patterns. He looks for access points. He learns what has worked before and then adapts. So when old tactics stop being effective, he escalates. He becomes more subtle in one season, more aggressive in another, more psychological in another, more relational in another. He does not need to destroy everything around you if he can simply make you misinterpret what season you are in. That is often the real attack. To make you call a promotion a punishment. To make you call growth a breakdown. To make you call advanced warfare proof that God has abandoned you. To make you retreat from the very threshold you fought so hard to reach. And that is why this chapter matters so much. Because if you misunderstand the season, you will use the wrong response. You will start shrinking when you should be standing. You will start apologizing for authority you were supposed to grow into. You will start trying to get back to the easier level, not realizing the easier level is the one you were delivered from. Some of you do not need less pressure. You need better interpretation. You need to realize that what feels like everything getting worse may actually be evidence that your life is stepping into a higher order of significance. The panic around you is revealing something. The unusual resistance is revealing something. The way old distractions are no longer enough, and stronger ones had to be sent, is revealing something. You are not dealing with random chaos. You are dealing with reaction, and that matters. Because reaction means something in you is moving. Here is the practical takeaway you need to carry from this chapter. Reframe your current struggle as proof of a massive promotion, not ego, not fantasy, not spiritual superiority, just accuracy. Stop narrating this season as if all you can say is, everything is getting harder. Start saying, the level changed, so the pressure changed. Start saying, the resistance became more strategic because my assignment became more serious. Start saying, I am not under heavier attack because I am abandoned. I may be under heavier attack because I am advancing. That shift in language changes your posture, and posture matters. In fact, do something simple right now. Stand up straight and push your chest out for a second. Not because posture is magic, but because your body often has to help your mind remember what your spirit already knows. You have been carrying yourself like someone under threat. But maybe this is the hour to carry yourself like someone entrusted with weight, because that is what promotion feels like at first. Heavy, unfamiliar, demanding, exposing, but heavy does not mean wrong. Heavy may mean you have finally stepped into a season that requires more of you, because more has already been placed on your life. So do not waste this season begging to go backward. Do not spend it trying to prove that the battle should be easier. And do not measure God's presence by how painless the process feels. Measure differently. Ask whether your discernment is sharpening. Ask whether compromise is becoming harder to tolerate. Ask whether the things that once kept you small are losing some of their grip. Ask whether the pressure seems concentrated around the very areas that matter most to your next chapter. Because if that is true, then what you are living through is not just opposition, it is confirmation. And once you see that, you are ready for the next truth. If the enemy upgraded the attack, heaven upgraded the protection. Once you realize the battle changed because the stakes changed, the next question becomes obvious. If the pressure increased, what did God put around me for this level? Because heaven does not promote you and then leave you underprotected. That would make no sense. A greater assignment requires greater covering. A higher altitude requires a different kind of support. And one of the biggest mistakes people make in intense seasons is assuming that because the attack feels stronger, their protection must be weaker. But the strength of the attack is not proof of the absence of protection. Sometimes it is proof that the protection around you is the only reason the attack has not done what it intended to do. You are still here. You are still thinking, still discerning, still trying, still getting back up, still returning to prayer, still refusing to fully surrender your future to fear. That matters more than you think. The enemy wants you to focus only on the fact that the battle is harder. He does not want you to notice how much has already failed to take you out. He does not want you to notice the doors that closed before disaster could enter, the relationships that exposed themselves before they could destroy you, the exhaustion that should have broken your faith but somehow did not. The attack did not arrive because you are unguarded. In many cases, it arrived because something about your life has become important enough to require heavier celestial protection. God upgraded your angels too. That line is easy to say, but it carries a serious implication. It means the kind of support around your life may not look the way it used to. It may not feel soft, familiar, or simple. It may show up as sharper discernment, sudden restraint, unusual warning, deep internal interruption, increased sensitivity to what drains you, manipulates you, flatters you, or tries to lure you back into smaller versions of yourself. Protection at this level is not always comfort. Often it is precision, and precision can feel intense. Because at a lower level, you may have been able to drift and recover. At this level, drift costs more. At a lower level, confusion may have only delayed your own progress. At this level, confusion touches people connected to your obedience. At a lower level, compromise may have been private. At this level, compromise leaks outward, so the protection around you becomes more exact, more alert, and at times more disruptive to your flesh. That is why some people misread divine protection as pressure. They think, why do I suddenly feel so checked about that conversation, that environment, that habit, that opportunity, that attachment? Why does something in me refuse to settle into places I used to tolerate? Because the guard changed. You cannot fight Goliath with a bear hunting strategy. What worked in your last season may have truly helped you then. It may have been enough for that level of pressure, that size of opposition, that stage of maturity. But now the enemy is testing you in more sophisticated ways. Not only with obvious temptation, but with subtle delusion. Not only with fear, but with overthinking dressed up as wisdom. Not only with attack, but with distraction that looks productive. Not only with discouragement, but with tiny compromises that gradually reduce your sharpness. That is why this warfare feels more personal to so many people. Have you noticed the attacks against you feel much more personal lately? It is because the testing is no longer just about whether you will fall into something obvious. It is about whether your attention can be fractured, whether your confidence can be quietly eroded, whether your timing can be disturbed, whether your voice can be softened, whether your focus can be scattered before your next step lands with force. This is upgraded warfare, and upgraded warfare requires upgraded recognition. You need to identify the new ways the enemy is testing you, not just the old sins, not just the old fears, not just the old visible battles. The new tests are often more refined than that. Maybe now the pressure hits through mental overload rather than open crisis. Maybe it comes through fake urgency that keeps you reactive all day. Maybe it comes through relational entanglement that drains your authority. Maybe it comes through constant second-guessing after every step of obedience. Maybe it comes through subtle intimidation whenever you start speaking with conviction. Maybe it comes through emotional exhaustion that makes you crave relief more than truth. These are not random annoyances if they repeatedly target the part of you that carries assignment. And once you identify that, something important changes. You stop admiring the sophistication of the attack and start respecting the sophistication of the protection. You stop saying, "This is too much for me," and start saying, "This level of warfare must mean I have been entrusted with help that matches it." Because you have, heaven is not improvising around your life. You are not moving through a dangerous season with outdated support, while God hopes you survive it. There is intention around you. There is order around you. There is help around you. Even if you have not fully learned how to cooperate with it yet. That is the real issue for many people. Not absence of help, but lack of awareness. Support can be present without being properly recognized. Protection can be active without being deeply appreciated. And guidance can be available while you are still trying to interpret the season with an old lens. So here is the practical work for this chapter. Identify the new, sophisticated ways the enemy is testing you. Take an honest inventory. Where does the pressure consistently become precise? Where do you keep losing clarity? What kind of thoughts hit right before important movement? What kind of people, environments, habits, or moods seem to weaken your authority? What feels small in the moment but repeatedly leaves you scattered afterward? That is where discernment needs to grow. You do not need to become paranoid. You need to become accurate. There is a difference. Paranoia sees demons in everything. Discernment sees patterns and refuses to ignore them. Paranoia makes you unstable. Discernment makes you sober. Paranoia leaves you fascinated with darkness. Discernment keeps you aligned with truth and alert to interference. That is why the goal here is not fear. It is recognition. Once you can recognize the upgraded tests, you stop walking into them half awake. You begin noticing the timing, the bait, the tone, the repetition, the emotional signature. You begin seeing how the enemy keeps trying to approach through the same access points, just wearing more refined clothing. And when that happens, your confidence starts returning because the battle is still real. But now it is named, and what is named becomes easier to confront. So remember the perspective shift. You are not failing. The game just got harder. And if the game got harder, then heaven did not leave you at last level's capacity. You have more support than you think, more covering than you feel, more precision around your life than you have fully honored. But support alone is not enough. In the next chapter, we need to talk about why some of your old weapons cannot come with you into this phase at all. Once you understand that the battle changed and the protection changed, you run into the next issue very quickly. Your old weapons start failing in your hands. That can be deeply unsettling, because a weapon that once helped you survive can feel almost sacred. It got you through something real. It protected you when you were vulnerable. It helped you endure a season when you did not yet know how to stand with the kind of authority you are being asked to carry now. So when that old method stops working, it is easy to feel exposed. It is easy to think something is wrong. It is easy to scramble backward and try harder with the very thing that is no longer meant for this altitude. But not every strategy that preserved you in one season is supposed to follow you into the next. Some things were survival tools, not permanent weapons. And if you do not recognize the difference, you will keep trying to defend an advanced calling with beginner-level coping mechanisms. That is one of the defining tensions of Phase 2. In earlier seasons, the goal may have simply been to make it through, to not quit, to hold on, to stop the bleeding, to avoid collapse. And there is no shame in that. Survival seasons are real. They teach endurance. They build grit. They force honesty. They reveal what you reach for when life gets dark. But eventually, there comes a moment when survival itself becomes too small a vision for what God is asking of you. Because if your whole prayer life is still organized around barely making it, then you will keep living with the posture of someone trying not to lose, instead of someone called to advance. And those are not the same posture. A defensive life always waits for impact. An authoritative life creates movement. A defensive life reacts after the pressure arrives. An authoritative life sets spiritual terms before the pressure settles in. A defensive life is always trying to recover stolen ground. An authoritative life starts thinking about territory, influence, atmosphere, and alignment. That shift is uncomfortable because it requires you to release identities that once felt necessary. Maybe your old weapon was withdrawal. You got quiet, disappeared, and tried to protect your peace by making yourself smaller. Maybe your old weapon was constant explanation. You tried to talk your way out of tension, justify yourself to everyone, and manage how people perceived you so the pressure would ease. Maybe your old weapon was emotional numbness. You stopped expecting much, stopped feeling deeply, and called that stability. Maybe your old weapon was hypervigilance. You learned to scan every room, brace for disappointment, and stay mentally ahead of possible pain. Maybe your old weapon was emergency prayer only. You prayed hardest when something was already breaking, and your whole spiritual rhythm became crisis-driven. These things can look functional for a while. Some of them may even have felt wise in a different chapter. But in this phase, they keep you too low, too reactive, too guarded, and too easily dominated by whatever shows up first. You cannot build authority from a crouched position. That is why some of you feel frustrated. You are still sincere, still praying, still trying. But something in your spirit knows your old pattern is no longer enough. The same hiding, the same scrambling, the same panic, the same just get me through. These prayers do not carry the same strength they used to. Not because prayer became weaker, but because your assignment is calling for a different posture inside prayer. You are being invited to retire old weapons, not because you are arrogant, not because you are pretending the battle is easy, but because this level cannot be navigated by a soul that only knows how to absorb impact. At some point, you must become willing to confront instead of only endure. And that starts with the way you pray. A lot of people in intense spiritual seasons spend most of their prayer life asking for relief. Help me get through today. Help me survive this week. Help me not fall apart. Help me not lose my mind. Help me make it out of this. Those prayers are human, honest, necessary at times. But if that remains your permanent language, then your entire spiritual imagination stays trapped in emergency mode. You never begin to think like someone entrusted with authority. You never start addressing the deeper issue. You only keep asking for enough strength to withstand what should eventually be confronted. That is why the practical shift in this chapter is so important. Stop praying for survival and start praying for territory. Territory means the places your life is meant to influence. Your peace, your mind, your home, your habits, your voice, your calling, your obedience, the atmosphere around your decisions, the boundaries around your focus, the future attached to your stewardship. When you pray for territory, you are no longer only saying, "Lord, help me make it through this attack." You are saying, "Lord, establish what belongs to you in and around my life so thoroughly that what opposes it loses room to operate." That is a very different kind of prayer. It is not passive. It is not timid. It is not built around the assumption that you will always live one step away from collapse. It comes from a deeper agreement with who you are becoming. And this is where many people hesitate. Because offensive spiritual authority sounds intense until you understand what it actually means. It does not mean being loud for the sake of being loud. It does not mean pretending to have no weakness. It does not mean theatrical language, inflated confidence, or speaking like you are trying to impress heaven. It means standing in alignment with what God has already declared, and refusing to keep negotiating with patterns that are trying to outlive their access. Authority is not performance. Authority is agreement. It is when your prayers stop sounding like conversations with fear and start sounding like cooperation with truth. Instead of saying, "I just hope I can survive what is happening around me," you begin saying, "Everything assigned to dilute my clarity, fracture my focus, weaken my obedience, and intimidate my voice must lose its place in my life." Instead of saying, "Please just help me not break," you begin saying, "Establish strength in me where I have been unstable, and let every pattern that feeds on that instability be cut off." Instead of only asking for escape from pressure, you begin asking for rule over the places where pressure has tried to define your internal world. That is territory language, and territory language changes you. Because words shape posture, this is a good place to remember something simple. You are not failing because your old weapons feel weak. That weakness may actually be mercy. It may be God refusing to let you stay dependent on strategies that cannot carry where you are going. It may be the closing of an old chapter where coping was enough. It may be the beginning of a new chapter where authority is required. That does not happen all at once. You may still catch yourself slipping into defensive patterns. You may still feel the pull to retreat, numb out, over-explain, or pray only from panic. But now you can notice it. Now you can interrupt it. Now you can ask a better question. Not just, "How do I feel safer right now?" but, "What would authority sound like here?" That question matures a person. Because authority does not deny fear. It gives fear less permission to lead. Authority does not deny weakness. It refuses to build identity around weakness. Authority does not deny battle. It stops treating battle as the center of reality. This is the line many people need to cross in phase 2. You are no longer being trained only to endure pressure. You are being trained to govern atmosphere, to establish alignment, to push back on what has been pushing on you, to stop living spiritually hunched over, waiting for the next blow, and start living like someone whose voice carries consequence. That is why retiring old weapons matters so much. You cannot command a room while secretly clinging to the habits of someone trying to hide in it. And once that clicks, the next step becomes unavoidable. If your prayers are going to shift from survival to territory, then your voice itself has to change. Because in the next chapter, we need to talk about what happens when you stop whispering your way through warfare and start commanding the room. By the time you reach this phase, the issue is no longer just whether you believe spiritual help exists. The issue is whether you know how to speak like someone who expects heaven to respond. A lot of people have sincere faith, but an uncertain voice. They believe God is with them. But when pressure rises, their language collapses. Their words become foggy, apologetic, hesitant, and emotionally led. They speak more from what the attack feels like than from what truth has already established. And that matters. Because your voice is not a small thing in spiritual warfare. Your voice reveals agreement. It reveals posture. It reveals whether you are standing inside fear, confusion, and reaction, or whether you are standing inside alignment, clarity, and delegated authority. That is why this chapter is called Commanding the Room, because some atmospheres do not change just because you notice them. They change when truth is spoken into them with consistency, sobriety, and conviction. Your voice sets terms, not because you are trying to control everything, not because your words are magic, but because repeated, aligned speech trains your inner world, draws lines in the unseen, and stops fear from becoming the loudest voice in the space. Many people never learn this. They spend years feeling spiritual pressure, sensing tension, recognizing patterns, even praying sincerely. But they never develop governing language. They only describe what is happening. They narrate the heaviness. They confess how overwhelmed they feel. They repeat the size of the attack. And over time, they become fluent in the atmosphere of the problem, but not in the authority needed to confront it. That is a dangerous habit. Because whatever you repeatedly rehearse becomes easier to believe. And whatever you repeatedly believe starts shaping how you stand. So if every day begins with, "I am exhausted. Everything is against me. I do not know how I am going to do this. This is too much. I am under attack again," then even if those feelings are real, you are still giving your voice away. You are letting pressure define the room before truth gets a chance to speak. That is why your voice has to mature in this phase. You need language that does more than describe the fight. You need language that establishes order inside it. And this is where people get uncomfortable, because they worry that strong spiritual language sounds strange, forced, or performative. But real authority does not sound theatrical. It sounds clear, grounded, clean. It sounds like someone who is no longer interested in letting fear make every announcement first. So, what does it mean to command the room? It means when confusion enters, you do not only say, "I feel so scattered today." You say, "Confusion does not get to govern my mind. Clarity belongs here." When intimidation enters, you do not only say, "I suddenly feel small." You say, I will not agree with anything trying to reduce my obedience or silence my voice. When heaviness enters your home, your morning, your decisions, your relationships, you do not only sit in it and study it. You begin to establish what has permission to remain and what does not. That is commanding the room. And yes, this is where many faith-filled people need to grow, because they are waiting for authority to feel natural before they use it. But authority usually feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. At first, it can feel awkward, almost too direct, because you are used to language shaped by defense, caution, and emotional aftermath. You are used to speaking after the hit lands. This chapter is about learning to speak before the atmosphere fully settles. Quick recap: entry-level demons do not attack executive-level destinies. So you cannot stay at this level and keep talking like a frightened beginner every time pressure rises. You need a daily decree rhythm, not empty repetition, not superstition, not a script you recite while your heart is absent. A decree, in this context, is a deliberate statement of alignment. It is how you train your mouth to agree with heaven faster than it agrees with fear. It is how you stop starting every day from neutral. It is how you remind your inner world that pressure may be present, but pressure is not in charge. And because this chapter is practical, here is the 3-part daily decree script to dispatch your angelic team. Part 1 is identity and authority. This is where you establish who you are and what season you are in. You are refusing the language of helplessness. You are stepping into agreement. You say something like, I do not enter this day as a victim of spiritual pressure. I enter it under God's covering, aligned with His purpose, and authorized to walk in clarity, obedience, and strength. I will not bow to confusion, intimidation, or delay. Notice what that does. It resets posture. It reminds your mind that the day is not beginning under the rule of threat. It is beginning under the rule of truth. Part 2 is boundary and assignment. This is where you define what does and does not have access. You stop being vague. You begin drawing lines. You say something like, everything assigned to weaken my focus, drain my peace, distort my thinking, or sabotage my obedience is denied permission to flourish around me today. Let every influence that is not aligned with God's purpose over my life be exposed, interrupted, and removed. That is boundary language. Clean, direct. 10 is sober. You are not begging the darkness to behave. You are declaring what cannot stay in agreement with your assignment. Part 3 is activation and movement. This is where you stop merely blocking interference and begin releasing support for what matters. You say something like, let the help appointed to my life be active around me today. Let protection guard my steps, discernment sharpen my choices, and strength accompany every act of obedience. Let what heaven wants established through me move forward without unnecessary obstruction. This is the part many people skip. They know how to ask for protection, but not how to expect movement. They know how to pray against attack, but not how to pray for advancement. Phase 2 requires both, and here is the key. Say it with your actual voice. Not only silently, not only mentally, not only when things are already going wrong. Use your voice because your own ears need training too. Your nervous system needs to hear you speak from alignment. Your habits need to hear a different leader. The room needs to hear what you agree with. The atmosphere around your life should not hear only your panic, your fatigue, and your reaction. It should hear your order. Have you noticed how different you feel when you stop collapsing inward and speak clearly? That is not denial. That is realignment. This is a good moment to do the simple exercise again. Stand up straight and push your chest out. Speak from that posture, not for performance, but because physical alignment can help call your mind back into spiritual agreement. Your body has been practicing retreat long enough. Let it learn authority too. This is how commanding the room begins. Not with spectacle, with consistency, with a daily voice, with language that establishes identity, sets boundaries, and activates support. And once that becomes a rhythm, you stop entering every day surprised by warfare. You begin entering prepared. What changed in your life is not just the intensity of the battle. What changed is the level of the assignment attached to your obedience. That is why the warfare feels more intelligent. That is why the pressure feels more targeted. That is why the old survival habits feel weaker now. You are not being punished. You are being trained for a higher altitude. There was a changing of the guard. The attacks became more sophisticated because your destiny became more costly to the kingdom of darkness. But heaven did not watch that happen and leave you unsupported. Your protection was upgraded too. Your task now is to stop reading this season like a victim. Stop reaching for outdated weapons and start using your voice with clarity and authority. This is phase 2, and phase 2 requires a different posture. So, from this day forward, do not wake up only trying to survive. Wake up ready to establish territory. Do not let fear make the first announcement over your mind. Your home, your focus, or your calling. Speak first. Stand first. Align first. Command the room. Because once you understand that the game got harder because your assignment got greater, you stop shrinking from the pressure. You start interpreting it correctly. You are not failing. The game just got harder. And now you know why. If this spoke directly to the season you are in, write PHAs 2 in the comments. And if you know someone who has been misreading their battle as failure, to send this to them. It may help them realize they are not under attack because they are forgotten. They are under pressure because something about their life has become dangerous in the right way.